For liquid tempera paint, you'll need your paper plate palette with small dots of color. That way you have room to mix. Your paper with your name and class on the back. Clean water, a couple different sizes of brushes, and a couple paper towels. These can be used for cleaning brushes as well as any spills or doing designs on your paper. So with this kind of paint, you actually don't need your brush to be wet unless you're cleaning it between colors. When we mix, we're going to take small dots of color, and if you don't want your colors here to mix, before you get a new color, you're going to wash your brush, and I'm putting the brush on the bottom of the cup, wipe it, and blot it on your paper towel. If there is color here, you're going to repeat this step until it's clean. And then I'm going to take a tiny little dot of color. We start with small dots. That way, it is easier to control how much paint is on your brush. If there's too much water on our brush, it will get very watery and the colors will swirl around and be harder to mix. If that happens though, you can take a paper towel, you can blot it, but it will add a texture and maybe smear your paints. I would also suggest that you start with pencil first. That gives you an idea of where you're going to be putting your color. So I'm just going to do some shapes and some interesting lines. I'm drawing lightly. However, the paint will cover up most of your pencil lines unless you're using a lighter color like yellow. Smaller areas, use a smaller brush. So I'm taking dots of color. I'm washing between colors so they do not mix. I'm blotting my brush clean. Mixing a tint is when you add white to a color and it will make your color lighter. Mixing a shade is when you add black to a color and it will make your color darker. Thin layers of paint, you should be able to see brush strokes and you might be able to see your pencil lines underneath. Thicker layers of paint, you will see little globs and there'll be darker and lighter areas depending on how thick your paint is. Scratching is where you have a color and you put another color on top, and while the top color is dry, you scratch through with your brush and it will leave marks and the color beneath will show. Wipe your handle when you are done. Double or triple loading is when you put more than one color on your brush at a time, and I've not mixed them around. And then when I put them on my paper, those colors show up partially mixed. Some of them are not mixed. Dry brushing is where I put some paint on my brush and then I get most of the paint off. And this really helps to have a paper towel. So you're taking most of the paint off and you start to see more of those dry brush strokes. And the more paint that I take off, the more texture that I will see. You might also try mixing right on top of paint that is wet. So if I do a base layer of paint, and then I get another color and start painting right on top, it will start to mix together in some areas depending on how thick or thin the paint is. When using tempera paint, it's a good idea to paint your biggest areas first. That would include background areas. That way you're not having to do so much slowing down like this and painting around your complicated shapes. Be sure you're switching to small brushes for small areas and large brushes for large areas. with this paint, letting layers dry before you move on to smaller detail areas is a good idea so that you're not touching up and redoing areas.